This is Anything Goes, a podcast directly for you, by me, Astrid Skye. Okay, so I had this really good plan the other night. And whenever I start a story like that, you can probably already guess that the plan didn't really survive the evening. Maya and I had decided to go out for dinner, just the two of us. And it was actually supposed to be one of those slightly productive evenings where we could have some nice food, maybe a glass of wine, talk about the podcast, and figure out what I wanted to do with the next couple of episodes. I even brought my little notebook, which always makes me feel much more organized than I actually am. And for a while, we were genuinely doing quite well. We were talking about ideas, Maya was asking me questions, I was writing things down, and I remember sitting there thinking that this was actually really nice. Maybe this was how normal adults worked on things. You just went somewhere, ordered food, opened a notebook, and somehow became productive. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that very responsible podcast planning, my body apparently decided that we had been productive for long enough. I don't really know exactly when it happened, because there wasn't one particular thing that started it. It wasn't like there was some incredibly attractive man sitting at the next table staring at me, or Maya suddenly started telling me something sexy, or anything like that. We were literally just sitting there talking about my podcast, and somewhere in the middle of that conversation, I noticed that I had stopped listening properly because I had become really, really turned on, which is not particularly useful when you're trying to discuss podcast ideas in a restaurant. At first, I tried to ignore it because I thought maybe it would just disappear again, but apparently my body had made other plans for the evening. And the more I tried to concentrate on what Maya was saying, the more aware I became of it. So there I was with my notebook open in front of me, trying to look like a woman who was very seriously developing her podcast while my brain had completely abandoned the meeting. And Maya knows me far too well, so of course she noticed. She looked at me at one point and asked what was wrong, and I did what every mature woman does when her best friend can clearly see that something is going on and said, "Nothing." She just looked at me. You know that look your closest friends have where they don't even have to say anything because you both know that nothing is complete bullshit? That one. So eventually, I leaned a little closer and quietly admitted that I was ridiculously horny and I had absolutely no idea why. And instead of being shocked, she just gave me this amused little smile that somehow made everything worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it. And this is probably where I have to admit that the evening became a little less innocent than I had originally planned. I started teasing her a bit, very carefully, because we were still sitting in a restaurant surrounded by completely unsuspecting people. And at one point, I managed to give Maya the quickest little glimpse of my breasts without anyone else noticing. She thought this was absolutely hilarious, which honestly says quite a lot about our friendship. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I also managed to spill wine on myself. Yes, on my breasts. Very elegant. There is apparently a version of Astrid Skye who can sit elegantly in a restaurant with a glass of wine and discuss interesting podcast ideas. But unfortunately, she had left the building by then. And Maya, being Maya, had her camera with her. Of course she did. So now she's sitting across from me trying not to laugh. I'm trying to clean myself up without making the entire restaurant aware of what is happening. And instead of helping me behave like a normal person, she starts quietly taking pictures. Honestly, I should probably stop going anywhere with photographers. The problem was that by then, I had stopped fighting the feeling completely. Nobody around us could see what was happening beneath the table, and I'll leave some of that part to your imagination. But Maya knew exactly what I was doing, and judging by the expression on her face, she was enjoying the absurdity of the whole situation almost as much as I was. And I think that was the point where I realized there was absolutely no chance we were going back to discussing microphones and episode structures that evening. The funny thing is that Maya didn't make any of it awkward. She was basically just like, okay, so this is apparently what we're doing now, and that is honestly one of the things I love most about her. There are some people in your life where you always feel like you have to present the slightly edited version of yourself, and then there are people like Maya, where you can sit in a restaurant, quietly admit that you're incredibly turned on, make several questionable decisions, spill wine on yourself, and somehow the friendship just carries on completely normally. She is genuinely one of the best friends I could ask for. But afterwards, I started thinking about the whole thing because surely I cannot be the only person this happens to. I mean, we talk about sexual desire quite a lot, but usually we talk about it when it makes sense. When you're with someone you're attracted to, when you're dating, when you're in bed with somebody, when something sexual is actually happening. But what about those moments where absolutely nothing sexual is happening and your body just decides, now? In a restaurant, on a train, walking around somewhere, sitting at work trying to behave like a functioning adult. Maybe you're having a completely ordinary conversation with someone and suddenly there is this sexual energy inside you that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're supposed to be doing, and now part of your brain is having a completely different evening than the rest of you. What do people actually do with that? Do you just ignore it and hope it goes away? Do you secretly enjoy it? Do you text somebody? Do you go home? Do you sit there pretending to be incredibly interested in your pasta while internally fighting for your life? Because I think that was the part that made me laugh afterwards. Nothing about the situation was supposed to be sexy. We had gone out to work. I had a notebook. I had actual notes. I had plans. And yet somehow I ended up sitting there thinking things that had absolutely nothing to do with podcast development. So now I really want to know if other people experience this too. Do you ever get that kind of sexual urge when you're somewhere completely inappropriate for it? And I don't necessarily mean that you actually do anything about it. I'm just curious about that feeling when it turns up at exactly the wrong time and suddenly you have to figure out how to carry on with your day while one part of you has apparently gone somewhere else entirely. And if it happens to you, please write to me because I would genuinely love to hear your stories. Tell me where you were, what happened, whether you knew what triggered it, or whether your body just randomly decided to make your afternoon more complicated. You can be anonymous if you want, obviously, and maybe I'll collect some of the stories for another episode because I have a feeling there are probably a lot more of us than we admit. And yes, before anyone asks, the evening with Maya did eventually move quite far away from the original plan. I won't pretend we suddenly became incredibly disciplined again and spent the rest of the night discussing microphones and episode structures, but I also came home knowing exactly what I wanted to talk about in this episode, so technically the evening did produce something for the podcast. That counts as work, right? I'm choosing to say yes. And when I thought about it afterwards, it was actually kind of perfect. I went out with my best friend because we were supposed to create content for Anything Goes. Then I got horny in the middle of dinner. Maya started documenting my increasingly questionable behavior, and somehow the whole disaster became the content, which feels strangely appropriate, because this is Anything Goes. So please tell me I'm not alone in this one. Send me your story, your weirdest moment, your most inconvenient moment. Or just tell me about that one time where your body had very different plans from the rest of your day. And Maya, if you're listening, thank you for once again being completely unfazed by me. I don't know how you do it. Although, to be fair, maybe you've just known me for too long. Talk to you soon.